Welcome to PC Perspectives Podcast. Today is, it's August 31st, 2011. Last day of summer, if you don't actually count those equinox and lunar type dates. But anyway, we are coming to you live via Twit, and for those who are listening through multiple different podcast methods, you can get a hold of us at 188-38-PC-PER or at podcast@pcper.com if you wish to leave us a message or any kind of email asking a question or commenting on Jeremy's lovely, lovely locks of hair. You can also subscribe to all the podcasts under http://pcper.com/podcast, or you can follow Ryan at Twitter at twitter.com/Ryan Shrout, and also at twitter.com/PCPer. So for this episode, I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Al Malventano.
And I'm Scott Michaud.
Scott is kind of a new guy. He was hired this summer by Ryan, and this is his first podcast with us, and obviously as how rough I have been, I rarely host the podcast. I imagine Jeremy, with his dulcet voice, would do far, far better than I would.
But I'm kind of liking leaning back and relaxing.
Well, yeah, and you're probably like drinking some bourbon.
Oh, no, that's Black Grouse Scotch.
Oh, well, fine. Be that way.
I am.
It seems like you need a refill there, sir.
Nursing.
Well, I guess we can afford to. Anyway, as we are going through this week's news and reviews, we have a few things to go over. The first of which is an article that went up today by myself. It is the CM Storm Cirrus headphones review. Now, CM Storm is kind of the gamer's arm of Cooler Master. And as you well know, they've been in the business for a long, long time, originally with heat sinks, and then they went into cases, and now they're doing fun things like keyboards, mouse pads, and these monstrosities, these USB plugged-in 5.1 headphones. Now, what makes this 5.1 is not that it does any kind of strange software tricks to adjust the sound like Ariel used to do in the 90s, and Creative has done not so well here in the 2000s and now going into 2011, 2012. Instead, they are using actual multiple driver sets inside the headphone cans. They are not the first to do this, but they certainly are the latest. These headphones have 4 drivers in them. One of them is a 40mm driver, which does all the low-end, low-frequency work. And then they have 3 30mm drivers that handle the rest of it. And so it handles the front channel, side channel, and surround channels. So it supposedly gives the illusion of 5.1 sound when just using headphones. The quality of the construction is pretty decent. They're somewhat heavy headphones, but they're solid, and they're not too bad. So fatigue isn't terribly something to worry about. They can get a little scratched up because I have 2 small children who like to run things around, and they have a few scratches on it. So we tested a multitude of factors, basically how it sounds in music, how it sounds in movies, and finally its primary area, which is gaming. Now, when we go into the music portion, I was a little disappointed. It was not as clear. It was just not as alive or vibrant as some other higher-end headphones that I've looked at in the past. Now, for example, the Corsair HS1As, which retail for around $69, they did really well in pretty much every category. I mean, they weren't fantastic, but they were well worth the price. My favorite headphones so far in terms of price performance are the Grado SR125s. And, these are just fantastic headphones for $150. It's still a little bit more than most people want to spend. But if sound is really important to you, you really want quality headphones, then you'd be looking at something at least at that price point. Well, with these, they come in at $129. And it has a lot of stuff with it that you can justify paying $125 for. Again, like I said, the quality is there. Construction. It's got a boom mic. It's got glow-in-the-dark logos, and if you can kind of look here, okay, maybe you can't. But on the end of this is this little clear plastic part, and when your microphone is active, it actually glows red, and when it's muted, it turns itself off, so that's kind of fun. It also comes with a control puck, which handles 2 USB plugs that have to be plugged in, otherwise it apparently will blow out the bandwidth of a single USB plug, and also it needs a little bit extra power to be able to power this up. And this handles all of the 3D surround and the distribution of the different sound channels. It's a pretty heavy little unit. It's going to sit on the desk on this nice rubberized surface, and it's not going to slip around at all. It's a nice constructed piece. And what's kind of nice about it also is you don't have to use the USB functionality. You can simply unplug the headphones from the puck and plug in a 3 mini jack and USB adapter to plug into your analog sound card, and it only uses the USB to be able to pull power, so it can make these nice little logos glow in the dark. Now, as I was saying, in music, it just didn't do as well, and I think a good portion of that is if you kind of look at the design, and again, it's hard to see. You see, there's this huge plastic plane here, or covering, that only has a couple of perforations in it for the sound to go through from all of these different drivers. And I think that they just made way too many trade-offs with the design of the cup, and with as many drivers as they have in there, that it just doesn't sound as good as you were hoping. And so if you're a big audiophile, if you really like your music, probably not the headphones for you. Now, when I went to movies, it was a little bit better. I mean, they, multi-channel sound. It's mixed to do well when you're actually using multiple speakers. And so, dialogue came through nicely, effects came nicely. The bass was decent, but it wasn't, particularly strong. But it was decent. I mean, if you're a college student who wants to watch a movie in their dorm without waking up all their neighbors or even their roommate, then these are, a nice little solution for them to get kind of the surround effect and still have decent audio quality. Now, the one area where it really excelled in was in games, and this is really the area that is primarily aimed at. And I didn't find many of the negatives that I had experienced in music and in movies when I actually did some gaming audio. Usually gaming audio is not as high quality as some of the things you would expect, such as, Dolby True HD type soundtracks from Blu-rays, or 24-bit recordings of, musical pieces. And instead, games, they came through very, very well on this. There was enough bass. It had a good feeling of surround. It was not as good as having a true dedicated 5.1 speaker setup, but it was, for the price you pay and where it's aimed at, excuse me, it's a good set of headphones. So, you really have to shop around, and you really have to think what is most important to you. If you want good quality all-around headphones that will excel in all aspects, then you'd probably be better off going with the Corsair HS1As or the HS1s, which have the USB connector as well. If you really prefer very high quality music that will also do very well in movies and games, then going up to the Grados or $150 pair of Sennheisers, that would be a good option. But if you're doing primarily gaming, you want to have that 5.1 kind of sound, then these are a really good option for you. Again, it's going to be $129. It's a little bit higher than most people are willing to spend on headphones, but it's not terrible. So, those are the CM Storm Cirrus, not Sirius, headphones.
Which is ridiculously close to the Sirius headsets that are being sold.
Sirius. Who makes the Sirius headsets?
Oh, God. Now I have to remember that. They're mostly
Sirius
Bluetooth.
business.
Oh. Well,
They come from Sirius
Okay,
Satellite,
that'd be
and they
epic.
come from Canadian Tire. Oh,
Well.
that's why you don't know it.
Yeah, that's right. That we don't have
Canadian
Canadian
thing.
tire here. Makes no sense at all.
No crappy tire whatsoever.
Earlier this week, Ryan wrote about the Asus Mars II dual GTX 580 graphics card. This thing had a total of 3 gigs of memory on it. And Jeremy, did you read over that at all?
And turn quite green with jealousy, frankly.
Well, you better tell us about the depths of
The
that jealousy.
brick, it really is. There's no argument about it. A brick, because I mean, we saw the week previous when Ryan wasn't out gallivanting with his friends at AMD, a different card, almost as obnoxiously insane, and almost as big, but significantly nicer looking, from NVIDIA, the GTX 580 Platinum. This thing, the Mars II, is a dual GPU, which really does literally look like a brick. There is no aesthetics to this. The shroud on it is square, it's big, and you better hope you bought a large case to fit this in. Because the thing, I don't actually have his measurements on hand, but you can expect it to be almost an extra inch longer than what you're expecting from your average 5970 or 6970, sorry, and 13 inches long, actually, 6.5 inches tall, 2.5 inches thick. This is a big card. And it's not just big in size, it's big in performance. He had a little bit of fun finding out that you can overclock the GPUs separately. So when you do sort of overclock the card, you might all of a sudden find that it really isn't performing up to the specs that you expected it to, until you actually realize that you can actually overclock the GPUs separately, which, for some cases, when you're actually fighting the very, very top end of performance in an overclocking contest, could be useful. If you're trying to benchmark, it's not going to be so useful. But this thing was happily keeping up with just about anything on the market. The 6990, if you can actually find it, does have an extra gig of memory. It's got 4. As opposed to this 5800, or 580, which has 3 gigabytes. But in almost every case, it was quite happily keeping up with anything you could throw at it. And there was a little bit more to it, which was essentially, as I'd mentioned, you could overclock it. In the best that Ryan managed, he hit 875 on the core clock, and just a hair over 4 gigahertz on the memory clock, which was not... He didn't want to call it 100% stable. He did run into a few problems with it, but he does have a 3D Mark 11 score, which means that it actually did make it through with 4,253 points. It's, about an 8% gain in the GPU over what it comes out of the box, and as it comes out of the box is just crazy, especially on games like Lost Planet 2, which are really favoring NVIDIA. So in a way, with this particular card, of which there were very, very few made, and you actually get this little silver-plated document stating that you did buy a limited edition card, it does sort of look like NVIDIA can now claim the fastest card on the planet. Perhaps not the fastest single GPU on the planet, but definitely the fastest card. If you want to pay $1,400.
And there's only going to be
who doesn't?
999 of them made.
Like, it's not just a limited edition, extremely limited edition. And because of the volumes of orders that we're expecting, only 1 per household, please, because it's insane. It's a niche market, to the point where they're acknowledging it's a niche market by not making the card look like anything other than this giant black brick with a little bit of red highlights on it.
But it comes with a specially engraved plate.
Yes. with the number
Actually, let's
on
go back. Did they actually limit to one per household?
No, that was just the normal
Oh, I
telemark.
was gonna say because they have an SLI collector, so that'd be the absolute stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Oh, come on. Newegg sort of says limit 999 per customer. Because, I really, really want those 6970s that bad.
Well,
So,
limit 999 customers, so you can make sure that you only gets everyone ever made, and you can pick out the like number one and maybe number two if you're getting SLI, and then sell the rest of them. Because I mean, who wants to be number 979, right?
I can see a trading market. I've got number 49 and number 873 in SLI, but you've got number 48, so maybe I could trade you this one for this one. That way I can not only have them in SLI, but they're in series.
That would go over just like Bitcoin.
And trading cards, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't buy this for Bitcoin. You'll never make your money back. Never. So, I mean, it's a brilliant card if you are able to spend the money, the $1,400 or so, because I mean, with limited supplies, prices are going to bounce all over the place. But if you're that desperate to have the absolute fastest, single PCB card on the planet, it's dual GPU, so it's not a single GPU, but that's pretty much what it is.
It's what it is.
Buy it.
Yeah, you
Now, if you want to
remember?
drive,
Do you remember last year, or about a year and a half ago, when Asus released the Aries card, which is the dual 5870s, and they sent a bunch to Newegg, and they were supposed to be the big official dealer, but the only way you can get one is buy one of their pre-built systems with the card built into it. So you would spend $1,200 for the video card, and they'd tack on another $1,400 worth of hardware to get it out the door. Wonder if they're going to do anything like that with these ones.
Wouldn't surprise me. A couple of branded cases, some nice
not
paint
many people
novels.
drank that snake potion, because I think like about 4 weeks after that they finally started just selling them separately because nobody's buying these systems.
Well, NVIDIA has a long-standing tradition of doing this, putting out the ridiculously high-end dual GPU card for, oh my god, how much? Yeah, they've been doing it for 5-6 years now. This is not new. This is not a new thing.
Yeah, but for that
actually,
same. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
one last thing before we move on, or if we're going to move on, I'm not sure, that needs to be said is that it only supports 2 monitors like everything else NVIDIA makes. So if you actually want to run 3 30-inch monitors, you're going to need 2 of them. That being said, if you bought 3 30-inch monitors, wasn't there a 1400? Is that what you're
I think that actually does support 3 monitors, but you have to use either the HDMI or the DisplayPort for the third.
Yeah, because there are
So you
2
could do
GPUs.
3 30-inches, but you've got to have DisplayPort for that third one.
Oh, right. That's why it was 3 30-inches, because it required 1440p, so it wouldn't be able to use. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, you couldn't do the HDMI. So, one last comment about that is that, for the $1,400, you can buy 2 of those MSI N580 GTX Extreme Edition cards, and they'll run even faster than this damn thing, plus have 6 gigs of memory. So, that's obviously something to consider. I've got those 2 cards running in the background, and let me tell you, they smoke.
I can't even hear them.
No, they're wonderful things.
That's
Beautiful.
impressive.
Hey, anyway.
Yeah, but if
anyway,
someone wanted to spend a reasonable amount of money on a GPU, we couldn't last week. How about this week, Josh? Can we pick up any 6970s?
That's a great segue into our next topic. If you remember last week, we talked about where have all the 6970s gone, and even though that may make a catchy kind of tune, it would have a very, very limited audience, people who would actually listen to it. But anyway, it was oddly enough, we had been watching for weeks, and 6970s were just not on the market. I released this article, we started doing the podcast, and somebody said, wait, there's like 15 SKUs on Newegg, and we look, and sure enough, they were back in stock on Newegg and a couple other places. Well, we decided to kind of watch and see where it was going, because the information we'd gotten from some of the partners was that the supply of 6970 GPUs was just very, very thin, and they hadn't received any for weeks. And apparently, just as we were putting all this up, shipments had gotten into multiple places, and they had cards. Well, a week later, those 10 or 15 SKUs are now down to 3 and 4 on most sites, maybe even 1 or 2, or even none on like Tiger Direct. I think there's 1 on M-Wave, and there's currently 4 on Newegg. And so we're still not quite past the stage where we have a lot of these products. And if you kind of keep an eye on Newegg, you see that the SKUs that they actually have are not in stock long, but they're rotating it out through the different manufacturers. Like one day you've got a couple of the MSI Lightnings on, and then the next day that's gone, and instead it's the Asus 6970 that is in its place with the big old triple slot cooler. And then a couple days later you've got a bone stock XFX board in there. So it is still not exactly flowing out of the fabs, and we don't know why. AMD has not been producing as many of these as potentially they could, but it seems like they still have a buttload of 6950s in stock. So if you just want to take one of those and try flashing it, it's certainly an option. Any comments on that, Jeremy or Alan or Scott?
I wish that we could get the Sapphire Toxic in stock, because the 6950s are in stock, the base models. The higher end ones, the modded ones, many of the Lightnings that you've done, getting hard to find.
Yeah, I love my I love my Lightning. Love it. And we're going forward. Today we're going to take a little time off for an ad from one of our kind sponsors. And here it goes. All right, thank you very much for your sponsorship of our little talk here. Even though Alan isn't saying a whole lot, we're still not quite going to get to him yet. Do you feel happy as you're coming?
Oh well.
Feeling okay? Is that
Oh yeah.
90-degree average weather in Texas, counting night and day, really
You mean
agreeing
the
with
fact
you?
that the fact that it's almost 10 at night here and it's still 96 degrees out right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you go run around, semi-naked at 3 o'clock in the morning? And no.
I don't have that urge
Anymore.
Yeah.
Or any less.
It's 10 p.m.
Sorry.
Do you know where your clothes are?
So let's move on to the next topic. Apparently Jeremy wrote about a little something, or was it Tim? The Windows 8
Oh, Tim
support.
did the whole thing. I provided a small little link, and he
see.
actually took it
Scott,
off.
would you be interested in taking this? Do you know what we're talking about?
Yeah, Windows
No.
8. So for the longest time, Microsoft has been known for not exactly adding features pretty quickly, and there used to always be markets for like zip utilities and ISO burners and all that stuff, and they've slowly, with each version of Windows, been adding like one of those features that people have been buying stuff since like Windows 95 for. Currently, they decide, because of their enterprise business customers, to include the ability to mount ISOs and VHD virtual hard drive files directly on it, so that they can just do it without having to buy a virtual clone driver, something like that. It's nice to be able to do that sort of thing directly. I know I've had quite a few hard times with certain versions of, image burn and other image burn.
Such as
Mounting.
Nero and
Yeah.
Recode and all those fun things.
Yeah, those ones just
Image
causing like
rules.
crashes and stuff like that.
Yeah, because
Um,
image mounting, whatever that piece of software it is, it has to install its own version of a driver that's supposed to emulate whatever the DVD drive is or CD drive. So that's always kind of a touchy thing with Windows, right? Whoever codes that piece of software, they need to really know their Windows driver development model and be able to implement that all properly. And so the typical person, they don't want to pay money just for something to mount an ISO, so they're going to go for something free, and then, lo and behold, the free stuff tends to be the, least quality control stuff as well. So Yeah,
And
you
that's
end up
one more
with,
thing to load when Windows loads and all other stuff
And
as well.
Stardock and that doesn't like it either.
yep.
Bad Stardock.
Yeah.
You know,
But
what's the most interesting thing about the Windows 8 support on mounting ISO? You still can't rip an ISO natively in Windows.
well, no, because I think this is for virtual machines. Because I mean, the VHD files. Most of us are familiar with ISOs. The VHDs are the images you do a virtual machine off of.
Yep.
So
Never
now all of a
drops.
sudden you can mount a virtual machine onto your copy of Windows without, picking up VMware, without picking up one of the other ones. At least as far as I can tell from the press release, which does make sense for Windows, does it not?
And since
Yeah, it
they
does.
already have a long-standing tradition of only implementing one feature, probably gonna like Windows 9 or 10 or something like that before they actually give you the ability to make them.
Interesting
Gotcha.
stuff, Scott. All right, our next topic, GlobalFoundries and their 20 nanometer tape out. Now, originally this came from, I believe, FOD, and then GlobalFoundries released a little release about it. And of course, he kind of butchered some of the details, but essentially, GlobalFoundries did create a test chip for their upcoming and still far in the future 20 nanometer process, and it was taped out so they can use it as a test vehicle for this new process. Now, unfortunately for GlobalFoundries, apparently they're having some very hard times with even just 32 nanometer SOI. Apparently, Llano is yielding very, very poorly. We just are not seeing the adoption of this chip as much as we were expecting, and that's primarily because AMD and GlobalFoundries cannot supply it in the numbers that they want to the big guys like Dell and HP. And Lenovo and whoever else wants to buy tens of thousands of chips per month for each of their lines. They just simply cannot support that, and so we're not seeing as big of uptake. I know the motherboard manufacturers are a little unhappy because the new A75 platforms, the motherboards that are used to support these, are not selling nearly as quickly as they were hoping, or being led to or had been led to believe would be under there. So. It's nice to see that GlobalFoundries is thinking ahead, that they're still working on their 20 nanometer process, which will be kind of a half shrink from the traditional 22 nanometer, which Intel is producing at breakneck pace right now. But it's still going to be several years for GlobalFoundries before this particular line is open. Any other comments about that or things you guys think?
Well, I mean, they're going to be a little bit smaller than what Intel is planning. A whole 2 nanometers, which I'd say splitting hairs, but that's a much bigger scale. But the problem is that Intel is putting in Tri-Gate. So we're kind of hoping that GloFo, will iron out the problems that they're having. Because we don't want to see another TSMC, do we?
Well, actually, it's kind of funny you say that because TSMC right now is doing better than GlobalFoundries. They've actually got 28 nanometer process working in the low power, and looks like they're gonna have their high performance out before GlobalFoundries does. And
Yeah, they kind of cheated to do it.
I wouldn't really say that, but yeah, it's kind of a mess in the foundry industry right now. Intel has got a huge lead over everybody else. The amount of drama that's going on and the amount of significant changes that we may see in the next 6 months going to be impressive. Because, simply put, I don't believe that GlobalFoundries is doing as well as everyone was hoping, or as well as the perception that they were giving off. And I heard a certain rumor that AMD may, in fact, be looking towards TSMC to start doing more CPU manufacturing because, simply put, GlobalFoundries is unable to meet the demand and the specifications that AMD requires. So if that happens, and we may have seen kind of the first shoe drop in some talk about next generation Bulldozer Core being on 28 nanometers rather than 32 nanometers or 22 nanometers, that we may see AMD start leveraging their work with TSMC more than with what they've done with GlobalFoundries. And this is not, a questionable decision, because AMD has worked with TSMC for a very, very long time. And as you well know, all of their Zacate processors, namely the E350 and the Brazos stuff, it's all produced by TSMC in the first place. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go for the next generation. But anyway.
And Ryan will know, as he is sitting there at dinner being told things he's not allowed to say, being fed food he isn't sharing, and drinks he isn't sharing.
Well, I guess it's good to be the king, huh?
But you're not bitter.
Not in the least.
No.
Nowhere near as bitter as my beer.
Well, you know what? It's nice and cool here in Laramie as compared to Austin, Texas.
I'm
That's
not
going.
Austin.
No, but
he is.
Ryan is.
Yeah. It's hot there, too. It's just as hot there as it is here.
It's like Africa.
Yes.
And now we're finally on to Alan. Alan, you haven't said much all night long, and now we are throwing something down your alley, and it's not a hot dog.
Correct. We have Crucial M4, which I've actually looked at in the past, and there is a firmware that just came out for it. I think it's, what is it, Rev 09 they're up to, I believe. Yeah, I just downloaded the thing. I'm going to throw it on our sample here and run it through the gauntlet of benches again myself and see how it behaves. And probably, if it behaves well enough, I'll be able to throw it in with the mix of the other serial ATA 6 gigabit solid-state drives, which I'm working on. Because in the past, I hate to say it, but these drives have always had some performance issues. Even though they're the first to come out serial ATA 6 gigabit, they've just never been, never been really that good. They do barely even hit the rated speed, or anything approaching the bandwidth limits of serial ATA 6 gigabit. So hopefully now they can start doing that and competing with the likes of Sandforce and, actually it's pretty much just Sandforce now as far as pegging 6 gigabit serial ATA and doing like 550 meg per second constantly. So we'll have to see where that goes. I'm probably going to throw that firmware on the sample here tonight and start beating it up.
So I'm just curious,
Yes.
going off on another direction, have you heard anything about the new IndieLinks controller?
Not a lot that I can repeat yet. However, there is a new IndieLinks controller. It's being worked on, and I'm hoping to get my grubs on it pretty soon. I'm getting my grubs on something else earlier that does not use serial ATA. That's something newer, but I'm not going to say anything else there.
Is it bootable?
Yes.
Okay.
It wasn't
It
that
is
drive we
bootable.
put on the front page of our of the site,
What?
was it?
What did we put on the front page?
The 100
No,
gigabyte
not the
slash
hybrid
1
thing.
terabyte Revo?
No, not the hybrid Revo.
Oh, okay.
Not that one.
That's too bad.
No, it's not. Because the one I'm going to look at is going to walk over everything else PCI Express that has come out thus far. I believe. It'll be good.
And it's bootable.
And it's bootable. And it's bootable, yes. That's the most important part.
So I guess that rolls out Fusion IO.
Yes, it pretty much does. So, yeah, in a quick flashback there, the whole issue with Fusion IO is that they have it's a pretty darn good product, but the problem is they made their controller too dumb to the point where the driver has to do all the work, and the driver has to be too large to be something that could fire up before Windows gets into protected mode. So pretty much you just can't get a driver. Like, you can't have a boot time driver for this thing for Windows. It just breaks the driver model. I don't think there's even a way to do it. And for the longest time, they have thought that they would figure out some way to do it magically. Like, for the past, 5 or 6 years now, they've been, I think they gave up putting it in their press releases or their FAQs or any of those things. But initially, for the longest time, they were like, yeah, we're going to do this starting in Q3 something. I forget what it was, but it was something years ago where they wanted to do that. Oh, well. Poor guys. They can't do it. Too bad, so
No,
sad.
I don't want to put you on the spot, But are you intimating that PCI Express 3.0 is first going to be noticed for storage guys and not graphics guys?
That would not surprise me in the least, considering that PCI Express 2.0 boards are doing pretty darn well as far as graphics goes. However, we've seen the last Revo 3X2, the one we just looked at, right? That was saturating PCI Express was by for 2.0, I believe, and it was like just below the bandwidth threshold of that. So it was probably, for all intents and purposes, it was just saturating it. And that just is pretty much it's a pretty recent thing to come out, like PCI Express 2.0 as far as actually catching on and seeing boards for it, and then lo and behold, the first solid state drive that's actually using the 2.0 part of it just pegs it completely. That's pretty crazy. It's almost like what solid state drives are doing with serial ATA 6 gigabit, right? As soon as that came out, and there was one model or two models that came out right off the bat, and they didn't really saturate it. But as soon as like the heavy hitters came in and started using the interface, first drive to come out just completely pegged it. It's almost like now we need serial ATA 4 or whatever you want to call it. Who knows what the next one will be.
12G.
12 gigabit. That would, I don't know. That might break some other stuff. Might have to have like lead shielding on your computer case because there's too many zoomies going around in there. Who knows? In separate news,
Yeah, the half-life of our serial ATA cable is only 10,000 years, so...
The media, on the other hand.
So speaking of just drives coming out continuously and not letting up in the least, the solid-state drive decoder, SSD decoder, on PC Perspective, which is that little button in the upper right corner of our website, I've been working on this update, and it has been kicking my butt because it turns out there's a bunch of manufacturers, and they like to have every possible combination of every possible capacity on every possible kind of controller, and then they all come up with their own unique names for all of those. And it's kind of a headache if you're trying to take all those and put them into an easy, quick reference like we've done in the past. So I'm doing a monstrous update that has doubled the table in size so far. I still have a few models to add. There are currently 324 individual part numbers in the SSD decoder.
Can I sort them by controller?
They are sorted by controller. That's how it's always been. Yeah, so basically the idea is the purpose of this table was it started out as me just trying to keep track of what controller was in which solid state drive for just benchmarking purposes of my own. And then I started to have people come up to me and say, "Hey, I like this review that I saw on whichever controller. I really want to like buy a drive on it, but I don't know which company's making it. You only reviewed this one particular model." And so I sort of morphed my little handy spreadsheet into something that could be just a quick reference for people. So, for example, I have the new Sandforce 2281 controller on there, and it has its own chunk of these are all the companies that make one that has this controller. Here's the names of their product lines that use it, and then here's I'm even adding some spiffy stuff now that like the type of flash memory in each one, because what you're seeing now is you'll see here's a quick example that lays it out pretty neatly. OCZ has an Agility 3, a Vertex 3, and a Vertex 3 what they call max I/O per second model. Right, so there's 3 different models. All 3 are using the same controller, same exact Sandforce controller. The differences are the Agility 3 is using asynchronous MLC flash. That's the IMFT, like Intel Micron flash memory. The Vertex 3 uses synchronous, and then the Vertex 3 max IOs per second uses toggle mode flash, which is Toshiba/Samsung, which is actually a little bit quicker on like as far as access time goes. It's actually a little bit faster even than the IMFT flash. So you end up with 3 different types of flash memory that can be used with the same controller, and then everybody else starts jumping on that bandwagon. Like Corsair has 2 SSD lines, same kind of deal, 2 different kinds of that flash memory. Memorite's doing something. Actually, no, Memorite's not really doing anything similar at all. They're just kind of doing their weird. You guys remember Memorite? That's like, no. I was surprised to
even remember Memorex.
No, there's this old company called Memorite. They've been in the flash memory thing for a long time. And they're trying to come back, I guess. But spent like an hour looking for their part numbers for their solid state drives. So hey, remember,
Well,
if you're
this
listening.
this is kind of nice that they do it this way, because think of how nasty it was last year when a couple of manufacturers were using all the SandForce 1000, 1200 series, but they had different types of flash memory in there, and you were seeing 10 to 20% difference in not just IOPS, but overall bandwidth.
Yep, and
Because they
actually,
were saying, hey, we went to this 25 nanometer flash from the 32 stuff. The 32 stuff actually was a little bit faster, but we
yep.
went to this because it's cheaper, but it's a little bit slower. But we
And
use the
boy,
same
have I
model.
got some. Boy, have I got some news for you, because what I've been digging up, that's actually been probably the last 2 days worth of digging on this, is in this update that's coming out within. I'll probably slip the current, like what I'm tweaking right now, I'll probably just slip that into the page silently. So if you're listening to our podcast and you look at the decoder, you might see the new-ish one. Maybe not fully newish, but sort of newish. So to get to this decoder, when you go to that page, there's a little link underneath what looks like a picture of a Excel spreadsheet there, and you can actually open the thing up and scroll around on it. But what I'm adding to it is, instead of just saying MLC or SLC flash, I'm also entering, like, for the second generation, or for Serial ATA 3 gigabit, which is the original SandForce controller, I'm adding which model numbers did have 25 nanometer, for example. So when they made that shift, and then you ended up with those drives that had the better performance because they were moving to that other, different process flash, for example, I'm actually separating out those SKUs into a different chunk for that same, model number, for example. So, like, Corsair had a 4 series, and their 4 series was the SandForce, the SandForce 1200 series, and they have, like, 8 different models that were the original, standard MLC, like 34 nanometer flash, and then they had also added another 6 models more recently that had the 25 nanometer flash, the new Intel stuff that came out. And then I also figured out their little trick to their part number naming, so you can actually pick out the part number that's specific to the newer flash. So if that's a drive you want to go for, just Google that instead. So that should help everybody out immensely that's looking for it, because their specs are kind of weird. Like, when you're looking at these drives, you don't know. It's hard to tell just by looking at the read and write performance or the I/O per second, whatever their rating might be. Every company's doing it differently right now. There's really not a standard. So the average person, they can't just go to a website and look and figure out, this drive uses the faster flash, this one uses the slower flash. It's just a mess trying to figure all that out. So,
But you're good at messes, so
I'm becoming increasingly better at messes. And actually, I'd like to I'd like to give kudos to OCZ, actually, because if you go to OCZ's website and you look for one of their solid state drives and you go under their specs, they have just a product list. They basically do the same thing that I do on my SSD decoder, but just for their own products, and it's just it's like SSD breakdown on their website.
Steal their code.
It's almost a cut and paste for me to update my decoder from their stuff, and they're like, by all means, I think they sort of got the idea for their page from when I started to do my decoder, because the layout's almost the same, and I don't mind that they're stealing it. I think every other company should have an exact same kind of list for that, because that's what people need to look at when they're trying to buy these things, right? They don't want to know that, not to pick on anybody with cryptic part number names, but Kingston, for example. Okay, guys, you ready for this one? Kingston has hold on, let me dig this one up here. Kingston has 4 different model product lines that all have V100 in the name. So it's like
V100 Plus and
V100 or V100 Plus or V100E or V100M or it's like, and each one has the whole series of sizes, and nobody knows which controller is in what. And it's just like, what is this M? What is the E for? And the E is actually the same as just the V100 Plus. They're both using Toshiba controllers, but the one uses the encrypting Toshiba controller and the other one doesn't. So it's like, wow, I don't know. It's just confusing. Hence,
it
the
certainly
SSD
sounds
decoder.
it.
Yep.
And I'm guessing E is for non-encrypted, right?
No, the E, the E is for the encrypted. I don't know what they're thinking. These crazy people. Anyhow,
What
pcpro.com/SSD
marketing
gets you straight
genius
there.
came up with that one?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't
Anyway.
know.
So anyhow, down to our next piece of business, Cedar Trail preview. Apparently, Intel released some documentation, or it was leaked and someone stole it, and then distributed about the net in the most rude possible fashion, namely by putting VR Zone watermark on everything. Jeremy, have you taken a look at this?
VR Zone. VR Zone. Yes. Oh, well, and good on them for, hey, they went ahead and published it. But it seems that the netbook might not quite be dead. Or it might be that Intel is just not laying all of their money on the Ultrabook. But we're getting the next iteration of Atom coming out. And, I mean, pretty much the two things that you can pull out of it are with the benchmarks we saw. And these benchmarks are going to be internal, so, you know, take them with a half-pound of salt or so. But they're sort of tripling the performance of the previous generation Atom, which is almost useful because first generation Atom was an interesting product. Let's put it that way. It didn't use much power. So it might actually be able to handle, for the most part, say 3D Mark 05 or 3D Mark 06, PC Mark 2005. And it comes out really well on those benchmarks. Of course, not too many of us are actually running those benchmarks anymore except to amuse ourselves for some strange reason. The other thing, and which is actually the thing to take out of this, is that they have finally actually enabled HDMI out. And that is sort of a big step because, hey, suddenly I've got a native plug which is going to go both ways. I don't have to buy an adapter. I don't have to deal with trying to plug it into one of the, shall we say, lesser inputs on your TV. And if you're lucky, it's going to carry audio as well. There was nothing in the preview. I guess you could call it leak if you wanted to be a little bit more precise. Yeah. So it's possible that you're going to get audio out, not from the Atom, as far as I understand it, because they haven't mentioned anything about the chipset that it's going to be running on. But we're going to see Cedar Trail. There's no question about that. It is going to come out. And it's pretty much the only thing that's going to keep people from going directly to the tablet, which pretty much munched anything a netbook can offer. It's, you know, a little bit smaller, a little more compact. It's got a touch screen. It's the coolest thing on the block right now. And the netbook, well, you know, they were hot for not even a year, maybe 8-9 months, and sort of faded out. Both the Atom and the Neo. Just, you know, they really never went anywhere. Such a small form factor is great when you're growing up and your fingers are small and not needing a full-sized keyboard. But when you're sitting on a tablet, or sorry, a netbook with a 6 or a 9-inch screen and a 6 or a 9-inch keyboard, you know, good luck with that. But hey, we'll see the Atom N2800, and we will see it probably before the end of the year, but not necessarily. And you know, maybe it will survive. You know, I'm about as confident in that as I am in the Ultrabook, honestly.
You know, I think Cedar Trail is probably going to do better than the Ultrabook. Ultrabook just seems way too expensive for what you get, and if you want something like that, then you kind of go to Apple. What do you think? No? Yeah?
Well, it's a direct competitor, isn't it?
Well, I guess
Intel
so.
sort of thinks that they're going to compete against Apple, and, you know, maybe they knew something we didn't know before last week, so they sort of see it as a rape target because Apple's going to be going through some changes.
Did you say target or rape target?
Well, we'll see what the market says, won't we?
It also depends if you say tablet. Actually, Intel has said, I believe, when I was looking up, oh, what was I looking up? It was a news post I did like 2 weeks ago, longer than that actually. That Intel, one of the executives said that Apple was actually threatening them to drop them and use ARM. So I don't know really if that's what's kind of pushing the Ultrabook a little bit, or if, it's just completely disconnected. I don't know.
Hard to say. Kind of a last closing bit on this. The one thing that we kind of failed to mention is that why we got such performance increases from Cedar Trail, and essentially Intel massaged a little bit of the innards, but primarily a lot of the increases are from just a simple clock speed boost from the previous generation. They're going to be using 32 nanometer, of course, for this. They did jump the clock speed on the graphics portion significantly, as we can see from the results, as well as kind of updated a bit. But we might expect to see, in ways, this finally match the AMD Brazos type solution in terms of per clock performance, and probably get pretty close to it in terms of overall graphics performance. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not netbook is dead. It's still a viable product and something that that Intel is leaning upon still pretty greatly. And finally, we have our last article / news post. And I didn't read this, and I'm hoping Scott did. But it's mod the dial that goes to 11 on your AMD graphics card. Scott, do you have any idea what this is about? Because
I did read it a little while ago. Basically, it was a modding project, if I remember correctly, that lets you upclock your cards and memory and GPU using an actual physical knob, I believe. Not the one actually put up here, I don't think. I'm pretty sure.
Jeremy,
that's
it goes to 11.
It go. Talk to us, Jeremy.
It's louder. It goes
but mine
to
goes
11.
to 11.
It's a nice little paddle switch. Those of us that are old enough to remember when that was actually the interface you got. And essentially, he's got, you push it, and you can either go to memory overclocking or to GPU overclocking. And it actually interfaces directly with AMD's Catalyst overclock, but without having to go through the test beforehand. So you can essentially get the same thing as you do with some of the high-end cards, where you're adjusting the frequency live. As you crank it up, it actually goes up. There's no testing process. You can actually be playing a game, doing whatever. And it's also, thankfully, got a reset button, so that when you do finally break it, you can go back to basic settings and boot up again after, the blue screen of death that you just lovingly experienced as you were going faster, 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 you fool, you fool. So, hey, you don't have to reach inside your case anymore. Just mod this in, and you can have a dial that goes up to 11 right on your desktop.
And hopefully
Yeah,
turbo
because
button
that
too.
sounds so much. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
And hopefully turbo button too, because I missed those.
Yes.
Turbo buttons, because doing a dial is almost so much harder than flicking your mouse in like Afterburner and adjusting a slider.
But you can do it in game.
And it goes to 11.
And it goes to 11.
Yeah.
Well, in
All
game
right.
until you set it too high and you're gone. Computer crash.
What's that smell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just burning the dust off the card.
Hardware, software picks of the week. Now, Ryan submitted one, even though he was gone. I'm sensing a little bit of frustration from him. Basically, it was, don't buy the Samsung Verizon 4G LTE portable router! Exclamation point. I'm assuming he's had some bad experiences and would like to pass that on to you in the nicest way possible. Now that that's over with, Jeremy, talk to us.
Well, there's... I don't think this is actually what they intended it for. In fact, I'm not honestly sure what they intended it for. But Gigabyte just put out a little software tool which allows you to switch from IDE to RAID to HCI, a la you do in the side of the BIOS, while you're running Windows. Now, this will be all well and fine until you reboot, in which case Windows is going to be a little bit annoyed with you, because it's not going to boot. You do not just switch from IDE to HCI on the fly. Unless you actually visit the PC Perspective forums, where there is still the #1 hit on Google for how to switch to HCI mode with Windows already installed. But
I thought Windows 7 kind of got rid of that trouble. Windows XP was
I
horrible
still haven't played with it
the
yet.
HCI.
It's
Really?
still blue screens. It's
Oh,
still
nice.
if you've installed the full blown Intel driver and you were not in AHCI mode, then that sort of overrides the little automatic back and forth that Windows can do with the Microsoft driver. And it just sort of goes away. So you have to trick it. You still have to trick it into installing the AHCI driver under Windows while you're in Windows with it not yet in AHCI. That way, when you boot and you change a setting in your BIOS, it can see the hardware as it boots. That's the reason you get that blue screen. Is you're basically changing how the hard drive controller to a different hard drive controller as far as Windows understands. And it starts to boot, but then when it actually shifts over into protected mode and tries to load all those drivers, it's like, hey, I don't see a driver for my hard drive anymore. And so basically the hard drive just goes away in the middle of the Windows boot, and then it blue screens.
So I can't wait for the point where somebody just drives me absolutely insanely nuts at work. And, I can make your computer go faster. Here, I'll just install this. Okay, we'll switch it to this. See, it's faster. It's fast. Oh, yeah, you agree? Okay, it feels faster. Great. Until the next reboot, when they come running, screaming, asking me why their computer died. And I can fix it very
blue
quickly.
screen, blue screen.
Blue screen. Josh, what do you got?
Me, Steam, they always have all these wonderful sales all the time, and now they're offering Far Cry and the Far Cry 2 Complete for like $7.49 for both of them. If you've never played either of these games, I think it's well worth your time. Far Cry was really the first and the original sandbox shooter. So damn much fun. I spent many hours on it just trying to, either do run and gun, do stealth, do mixed mode, whatever. Played that game for hours. Far Cry 2, not as much, but still, if you're bored and you still want something that looks decent in terms of graphics, both of them are very good games and a lot of fun to play. Alan,
Yes.
you got something?
Have a sort of roundabout network security related pick that can also stop your kids from doing what you don't want them to do. How's that sound? And you guys know what I'm talking about?
Go on.
You guys don't know what I'm talking about? Come on.
I'm not even listening to you.
Oh, well, what good are you? Okay, so some of you guys might have heard of OpenDNS. It's just like, you just use their DNS server instead of whatever your, internet service provider gives you, right? Some other alternatives, like if you don't feel like using your Time Warner or Cox Cable or whoever they are, you could just use, I think Google has like their own DNS server. It's like 4.4.4.4 or some really cool IP address like that. However, OpenDNS does a similar kind of thing. They have a couple of IP addresses they'll give you for their own primary and secondary DNS servers, and they're pretty darn quick as far as DNS type services go. In many cases, they're even quicker than your ISP, even though your ISP is like the next thing connected to you. So, in many cases, they're just that much faster because it's bigger service. They're serving like US wide, that sort of thing. So chances are, if you'll look up with them, it's going to be pretty darn quick. So most people just use them for the extra speed. What most people don't realize is that you can make an account with them. And you don't. It's not like they do have a paid sort of thing, but you don't have to use that. You can just set up a username and password with them. And there's a bunch of different methods where you can basically just tell them who you are on the internet. Basically, you just need to provide them like what is your external IP address. And as long as you do that and you feed them what your IP address is and it gets connected to that username and password, you can go in there and set a bunch of like privacy and like child access controls. And so this is blocking like at the DNS level. So if your kid goes to whatever, insert malicious or insert silly website name of some social networking thing that you don't want them to get on, or whatever the case may be, right? Or especially, for people with kids, you don't want them going to any kind of a porn-related site, obviously. Even if they're doing it accidentally, just mistyping a link, right? So what you can do is you can go in there, you can uncheck those things. That's the content that you don't want on your network. And nothing in your house will ever get there, at least by typing in a URL, because the URL has to get looked up via OpenDNS. They're not going to give you the IP. Instead, they give you a page that says, your system administrator has said you can't go here. So, teach your kids that system administrator is dad. And so if you see that screen, then you're going somewhere bad. Don't do that. But yeah, it's pretty good stuff.
I'm telling your parents right away.
Yeah, and
I'm calling them on their cell phone right now that you tried to go to lemonparty.org.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other advantage is, under that same configuration screen, not only are there those little checkbox for types of content you don't want visible, but they have, you can actually type in URLs and insert them manually for like a blacklist or even a whitelist, that sort of thing. So you can be like, okay, kid, you're on Facebook too much.
Can you just load in your browsing history to the sites that should be blocked?
Yeah, so we can, hack into Josh's PC and get his browsing history and just add that to his block list at his house.
I'm an angel.
Then Josh would have nothing to do. Poor guy.
Nothing.
So what the only thing this doesn't protect you from is if your kids just like connect to your neighbor's Wi-Fi. So you have to make sure your kids' computers are connecting to your own router.
Or they know how to set their own DNS on their system. I believe that overrides router settings.
True. You could. But what I end up doing at my place is I just reconfigured my router so the only DNS it lets through is the stuff that's going to those two specific IPs. Because I'm a network guy and I can do that stuff. And there's actually a couple of like instruction things for that sort of thing. I got to make sure that if you're locking stuff down, all your requests just go straight through to them and nobody else. Stuff you should be able to outsmart your kids on, hopefully.
Yeah, well, somebody from the chat room actually went to Lemon Party for the first time tonight. So,
well, someone else said they're as old as the internet. No, they're older.
Yes, almost as good as Tub Girl. Almost.
So we actually had a question in the chat about this specific thing here, and they're like, doesn't that slow like what you're doing down? And actually, no, it doesn't slow it down at all. It's OpenDNS. Their server speed is what's dictating if they're like going to block that domain for you. And all they're doing is they're just serving you an IP address that directs you to the page that says you can't go there, instead of serving you the IP address that would send you to that website. So really it's it doesn't even change your bandwidth. If anything, it reduces the bandwidth that you're using. So it actually makes your network faster, if you count faster as blocking some content from your network. You can't go here. You just saved all that bandwidth. All I sent you was a page with 2 lines of text. Don't go here.
Scott, tell us what you got.
Okay, so people know that they're going crazy for HP touchpads because HP decided they're getting rid of the hardware division. They are going to kind of keep the software division, and the rest of their laptop division and their computer division could just go as well. Who knows? So they reduced everything to $99. Out it goes. And that went fine. They sold out of stock from whatever they had in the warehouse almost instantly. Then they recently announced that since there was so much demand, they would do another production run of the parts that they had to liquidate $200 off. They didn't say what price it would be for, but I'm assuming probably $99 as well, to keep up with demand. Which, admittedly, could be one of two things if they're smart, and we hope HP is smart, and their investors hope they're smart. But the first thing could be that they're trying to push WebOS. Not exactly necessarily the best idea, but that might be one rationalization for it. And the other rationalization, which we're all kind of hoping for, is that they just had those things made like 90% done anyway. So they're just like, you know what, it's going to cost more to dispose of it. Just sell them for $99 or whatever they're going to sell them for. Get them out the door as soon as they can, because it's going to cost more to dispose of them anyway. Hopefully that's what they're thinking of. If not, I don't know what to say about that at all.
It probably is a thing where they just shut their supply line down and they just have like, hey, we only need to order, 10% of the parts to finish this next big batch or whatever, and they're just like, the loss for selling them at $100 is better than the loss for just trashing all this unused,
especially if they're
disassembled
planning on
product.
keeping WebOS for other devices as well.
Right.
Well, no. But you know what the really great thing about this is? If HP does decide to, sell off their hardware division, AMD has another CEO to pick in about 5 years. Lenovo? Anyone?
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Anyhow, that seems to be our show for this evening. Again, you can get a hold of us either by calling at 1-888-38-PC-PER, or you can email us at podcast@pcper.com. You can subscribe to this lovely, lovely podcast with all kinds of wonderful links embedded in it at pcper.com/podcast. And again, you can follow Ryan at Twitter on twitter.com/Ryan Shrout, all one word, or twitter.com/PCPer. So that's it for tonight. We hope that you haven't clicked on too many links or gone to other places you probably shouldn't have and been horrified. And for that,
your lesson.
Jeremy apologizes profusely.
Right.
So, I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Al Malventano.
And I'm Scott Michaud.
New guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have a good evening.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening.